Good morning. We will call the meeting of the Board of Regents for Del Mar College District to order at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, October 1st. I appreciate the Regents' flexibility in scheduling this meeting today. I wanted to get this information to you all and make a decision on it as soon as possible, so I appreciate the flexibility in your very busy schedules. We do have a quorum and can conduct business. Would like to start the meeting with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Mr. Bennett, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And for the first time, we will ask you all to read with us the new Del Mar College Vision Statement. This statement was adopted as part of our strategic plan at our regular meeting in September, and so this will be the first time for us to read it aloud and in unison. And so this is a monumental day for all of us, and thank you to Dr. Wilson for leading us through that strategic planning process. Del Mar College will be the premier choice for life-changing educational opportunities provided by responsive, innovative faculty and staff who empower students to improve local and global communities. I thought we were missing a word. We'll work on that. Local and global communities. Thank you all very much. Del Mar College is streaming live audio and video from this official Board of Regents meeting on the college's website in real time, with the exception of any portions of the meeting considered as closed session by statute. Would like to, before we get into the details of the presentation, I would like to ask the Regents if there is anyone who needs any legal questions answered either now or before we start full deliberations. Do we need to go into closed session for any legal questions? Seeing none, then we will proceed with staff presentation on our item today with discussion and possible action related to the general contractor for the South Campus Phase 1A project. Dr. Escamilla is going to introduce our topic today.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Regents, and everyone for joining us here today. Today we're going to be presenting, as we've been directed by the Board of Regents, through a process that we're going to describe a little further in the presentation. So I don't want to spend any more time on that because that'll be detailed. But we're coming today as a result of Package 2 of our Southside 2016 bond for consideration. I want to thank the team that has come together, that has spent the last several weeks preparing. There's a very laborious process to scrutinize, as we had promised the board we would, to take this next step in the selection process. And we appreciate your time and your consideration. Again, lots of details in this presentation. You'll be hearing more from me throughout the presentation. That being said, Mr. Alfonso will kick us off and introduce the members who are here to present. We have a full team of architects and construction management and cost estimators.
Sir. Mr. President, Madam Chair, Board of Regents. On June 10, 2019, the college issued request for competitive steel proposal number 2019-12 for the construction of the South Campus Phase 1A Main STEM Culinary Arts, or Package 2. On August 1st, 2019, the Evaluation Committee reviewed the Statement of Qualifications and interviewed the respondents in the IC&C boardroom. At 2 p.m. the same day, the competitive steel proposals were opened and read aloud in public. The Evaluation Committee's selection ranking that offers the best value for Del Mar College is as follows. Number 1 ranked, Fulton Coast-Con. Number 2, Spalglass. Number 3, Sunt. The Evaluation Committee members included the following: Dr. Beth Lewis, Lenora Keys, Dr. Leonard Rivera, Dr. John DeHockamp, Robert Duffy, Regent Susan Hutchinson, Regent Libby Aberett, Regent Carl Scott, and myself. The design of the South Campus Phase 1A project was done by Gensler Architects and Turner Ramirez Architects. Construction management consulting was provided by AGCM. On August 27, 2019, the Board of Regents approved for the administration and its agents to negotiate a contract with Fulton Coscon General Contractor. In attendance at each of these negotiation meetings were Gensler Architects and their subcontractors, Turner Ramirez Architects, AGCM, Fulton Coscon staff, DMC administrators and staff. The staff recommendations are as follows. The administration is seeking 2 action items for your approval. Number 1, board approval to award a contract to Fulton Coscon for the negotiated price of $106,742,500. Number 2, board designation of unexpended funds in the amount of $9,850,000 for the acquisition of furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the South Campus Package 2 project. In support of these action items, I have Paul Wilhelms of Gensler Architects here to provide a detailed presentation to the board. Also present are Alan Collier of Gensler Architects, Philip Ramirez of Turner Ramirez Architects, Nathan Sweeney and Brett Flint of AGCM, and Belinda Williams of Project Cost Resources. Paul? We will be all here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Okay, go. Thank you, August. Thank you for having us to present. I think that you'll find this presentation illuminating and give some background on the resolutions that August introduced. So first, in terms of the project status, as you know, you've approved the bids for Package 1, and that work is actually well underway at this point. The utilities and the central plant are under construction. There's a lot of paperwork we're exchanging with Fulton in terms of developing the exact specifications and the buyout for the equipment. The building pads are in place for the 3 additional buildings. If you drive out there, there's a lot of dirt. There's a big flat spot. So they're ready for foundation work. The central plant foundations will be starting in August. So there'll be a rig out there drilling piers. On August 1st, we had the bids come in on Package 2, and they were 30% over the estimated construction cost. Our first step was to sit down with each of the bidders and discuss with them how did that happen, you know, and there wasn't any singular smoking gun. There were a lot of factors that combined and had an effect on each other that added up to those additional costs. One of the larger ones was we had requested that the college be able to occupy the buildings in August of 2021, and that compressed the schedule more than the manpower here would allow, and it increased the overhead and overtime by the subcontractors. That was a significant factor. There were some project procedural things that ended up doubling some of the allowances and the contingencies, and you know, those also contributed. There are also softer factors like steel tariffs had been announced during that bid period. There was hedging by some of the subcontractors for when they were going to purchase those materials. So one of the bigger factors too was the size of the project. There were a lot of only certain subcontractors that could bid it, and at the exact same time there were other major projects bidding. So all of those things added some premium. There were some finishes and things that we had added, feeling that we were on budget. We had, as we had talked about package one, that came in about 10% under. So we were confident in our estimates that they would be in line with historical averages. And we left in some of the additional refinements that, and we may not have if we knew where the bids would come in. So this is a cost summary of sort of the timeline. The original bond amount we're still within that and we're in budget. Originally, there were a higher number of soft costs allocated, including a pretty large contingency. That contingency, a big part of that was allocated for market conditions and escalation. So when we adjusted the soft costs, we added those in because we've realized what the market escalation is at this point, and that's what that was budgeted for. The reallocated soft costs then determined a budget of $116 million. We went back to, as I mentioned, we talked to all three contractors, and then you authorized us to proceed with negotiations on August 27th with Fulton, and we did that intensively, and they brought a large commitment to that. We had a long list of 250 items that we evaluated. Some we proposed, some they proposed, and we studied those in detail along with the staff and administration. Through that process, we determined that their negotiated bid price was $106,742,000. And we can get into, I'm going to talk in detail a little bit about that, but that also allocates a $1 million contingency within that for any of the items that are ambiguous because we didn't have time to fully flesh them out or once we get it fully refined. And as August mentioned, one of the soft costs that moved out of the bond was the furniture and equipment funding. I think one of the first things to stress is that our priority was to maintain the programmatic spaces in the program that was developed by the college. So there are no programmatic spaces eliminated, no square footage eliminated in the culinary building or the STEM building. We did study those in detail and determined that there wasn't reasonable approach to take those out. The one place we did reduce square footage was in the main building and the library on the 4th floor overlook and the glass bridge. And you can see an adjusted diagram of what that looks like, that the building maintains its design character and the overall character of the campus, and we think was a successful adaptation to make sure we met the budget. The other 250 items I mentioned ranged from $5,000 items like coatings on fan blades to, doorknob shapes to all sorts of things. It was an extensive list and a long discussion, and through that process, we arrived at the $106 million. As mentioned before, $5 million of it was from the project schedule and contingency overlap. So what's next? If this is approved today, we'll proceed with refining our base documents for the permit issue, refining those design changes that were enumerated in the 250 items. We'll give those documents to the city for final permitting, and Fulton will confirm pricing of some of those changes of things we didn't have time to refine. And then they'll enter the change order to the final contract amount. Hopefully we have some contingency left in that, and they'll proceed to construction. One of the discussion items was the compression of the schedule, and to sort of split the baby on that, we negotiated that the central plant, parking lot, and STEM building would be available for the spring semester with 6 weeks for move-in, so that classes can start there in March of 2022. The remainder of the buildings in the site would then be completed on July 15th in time for the fall semester of 2022, or a full 32-term construction period.
You said the STEM building would be occupied April the 1st, 2022?
That wouldn't be when what we term substantial completion, and Del Mar College can move AV items and furniture in and ready it for the session that starts in mid-March of 2022.
Not March, June,
April.
June,
May.
summer.
You're going backwards.
Yeah, I went
Be
the wrong
available till
direction.
summer. It'd be
Yeah.
too late for spring.
The idea is we would have substantial completion and occupy and put forth the academic buildings first for completion. The base year and the year that we take the snapshot of enrollment begins in that spring semester, and we're trying, what this planning does is gives us every opportunity that we can to capture enrollment for appropriations. And so that's why we ask that the order be put in place such that the STEM building then would be completed first, and then the culinary building, and then the student sports services building, or the main building.
And one of the reasons for that is the STEM building has the main core of the program and the most classrooms and the most lab and study spaces. So we wanted to open it for comments and discussion at this point and make our design team available.
Can we ask them to go ahead and come on up?
Yeah.
The difference,
I guess to introduce people in person, Philip Ramirez with Turner Ramirez, Belinda Williams with PCR Cost Estimating, Brett Flint with AGCM, and Nathan Swinney with AGCM. And Alan, the shy retiring guy, coming up here.
you were saying that the difference is approximately 19,242,000, and 5 million of that would come from contingency. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the rest of it would come from where?
Well, 3.5 million of it was contingency. 1.5 million was what Fulton had put in for schedule compression, which was
Okay.
additional
We
overhead.
extended the schedule.
Overtime. So when we extend the schedule, that wasn't necessary.
Okay, so where would the rest of the money come from to make up the difference?
As I mentioned, it was the scope reduction, reducing the square footage of the library and main building areas. And that was one of the most complicated parts of the building, so that was about $3 million. And then the remainder are all those 250 items, of which we probably selected perhaps 2/3, and they consist of a variety of mechanical, electrical items that we reviewed with our engineers that weren't needed. Or there was an alternate specification that still met the requirements of a 100-year building and didn't affect the quality.
So just by extending the schedule and by taking the contingency, that's going to be enough money to cover the construction cost of 106?
Well, there were other items that brought it down to 106.
Yep. There was a list, Rivas, there's a list of about 15 to 20 pages. There was two different versions. So we started off with lists of 15 pages of line items that we went through item by item by item.
But wasn't our budget for construction 87 million?
87.5.
87.5, and then
Trying to find out where's the rest of the money coming from.
it was all within
Within that?
the bond project in other line items, such as contingency, such as the time to completion,
Equipment, furnishings, fixtures.
equipment, furnishings, and fixtures.
That's coming from the plant fund.
That'll be from the plant fund, yes, sir, with existing dollars. And those will not be expended at the earliest for 2 more years out and so forth. So there's that.
Getting ready to move in?
Exactly. And so those line by line items now ranged in prices from, million to several, a couple of them were a couple $1 million, $25,000 at a time, $500,000 at a time. And so when you go through 15 pages of that, with over almost several hundred items, is where I would say, I'm
The
not gonna say the
delta
bulk,
is-
but there was the delta definitely in there, in those line-by-line items. Two things that I made sure of, and we had the engineers with us as well. Anytime anything was respec'd for price, respecified for price, it was all done with two things in mind, with the integrity of the building being a 100-year building, and that we do not reduce the scope of the scale of instruction. And we met those, along with our engineers for the first one, and with all of us together, holding on to the square footage for instructional usage for our students and staff and faculty.
So the space was cut basically from the library
Yes,
and the bridge.
correct.
Correct.
That is the space that was cut. It was more of the aesthetic approach that many colleges have, all colleges, including our very own here and on West Campus. But it was the area that presented the best financial opportunity to get to a certain number.
Any other questions, Mr. Rivas?
I'm still confused, I guess, because our budget was 87 million, and with the contingency, that's going to make up the difference, and we'll be okay. We don't need additional money from anywhere.
Again, within the budget parameters from 87, when you scale up and when you factor all those in, and you remove the furniture, fixtures, and equipment item, yes, within the budget, within the construction budget, we were able to derive and arrive at $106.7 million.
Okay.
Dr. Scamia, I have a question for you. Going back to what you were saying about instructional space, are you reassuring us that instructional space will not be lost? We'll have all the instructional space that we had talked about?
That's correct. That's correct. And that's what we started out with. And the other two buildings, in terms of square footage, the two primary academic buildings, the STEM building and the Culinary Arts Institute building, are not affected with square footage.
So
With this
we are
plan.
keeping all the instructional space.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Help me clear up some confusion. Up until about 90 days ago, or maybe 30 days ago, we thought we had an $87.5 million cost. When the bids came in, they were like 38.8% higher than our estimate. I think the board authorized 87.5 million a couple of years ago. So up until just a few days ago, we thought that was the number. What happened?
Well, as I mentioned, they were the market conditions. In the event that we would have, if everything had gone to plan, there would have been surplus funds in the bond. As it is, we're using the bond for the construction that was intended for. Belinda had a few more detailed items too to add to that.
I think there were several factors that happened at bid time on this project. I think one of them had to do with the schedule and the increases by the contractor to meet that schedule. I think that the balancing of what was in the program costs versus what was in construction, we did not have some of those program costs in our original estimate. Now that's been neutralized, and that has brought the contractor's number down. And I think it was the bid market. PCR has been doing work in the coastal Bend area for over 20 years on at least a dozen educational projects for Texas A&M at Corpus, for Del Mar, the building next door. We did the work on that, and also UT in Port Aransas. So when the bid numbers came in May, we thought we had it made. It was 10–15%. We were over what the bids came in at. What happened in June and July was Exxon put out a very large project that's going to take away a lot of the manpower that would have helped this project had it been available at bid time. And also the unemployment dropped to the lowest ever here. So I think it's a labor force issue, and I think that's the big bulk of it.
And that's gonna cost us $30 million?
I think that the schedule had a cost to it. I think that there's all pieces of that, yes, sir, I do. I think the bids reflected what the market was going to allow. And I think the manpower has a huge impact with the Exxon project going on over the next couple of years.
Well, we could have Nathan comment too on the recent market conditions.
So, to build on what she was saying about the local marketplace, AGCM is headquartered here in Corpus Christi. We're managing projects all over the coastal bend, also in San Antonio and Houston. And the unemployment rate, as everyone is probably aware, is at an all-time low. It's unprecedented. The labor market is certainly affected. The labor pricing is certainly affected by that. Because you received 3 bids, and the 3 bids were so tight, I mean, on a project of this magnitude, it wouldn't be unusual to see a bid spread of over 10% between high and low. I believe that the bid price is a reflection of the market. I don't think that you could expect any change without significant changes to the project itself.
I think also, Mr. Bennett, just to follow up with Nathan, you know, one of the things that we've seen traditionally on some of the larger projects we've been involved in is a lot more exposure to the bidder market. And the fact that we only had 3 for a pretty large project is, I think, some indicative that everybody, most of the major contractors within kind of this region, South Texas, they're all extremely, extremely busy. You know, I've been involved in projects where we, on this type of scale and size, square footage wise, where we see 8 to 10 type bidders, and that really brings in, you know, subcontractors and aspects from other markets that allow the competitive nature to really go in and take full effect. And the fact that we got 3 bids, the bids were very tight, means there was a lot of overlap between the subcontractor market and things of that nature, I think speaks to the fact that everybody's extremely busy at this moment, and we would have certainly liked to had more coverage in that regard. But I think that everyone is, we've talked to other contractors, and they just simply were too busy to bid it. And so I think there's some aspects of that certainly played into it as well.
So rather than paying a 38.8% premium, may it be better off if we simply wait until the market cools down? That's a huge cost over what our estimate has been for the last 2 years. Huge.
Well, you know, we think that, you know, that would decrease constructor confidence in Del Mar as a entity, and it would likely increase the costs even greater. At this point, there's no indication that construction is slowing here. There are additional large major projects planned on the horizon in the near and intermediate future. I think Nathan has a pulse on some of that.
So we've experienced these situations before, and that's a fair question. But given the market conditions, all the economic trend lines, all the economic statistics that we monitor, we don't see a slowdown, especially in the coastal bend area, in the short term or the midterm future. And so I think postponing this project, I don't think will result, simply postponing alone, I don't think will result in any savings or reduction in cost in the short or midterm future.
Can we be sure that the numbers won't change once the documents are redrawn?
Well, we believe that Fulton Coastcon is a quality, reputable contractor, and the negotiations that we interjected are detailed and highly specific. That list of items will be attached to the contract. So there may be some increases, but we also anticipate some decreases.
The contingency.
If-
And
If-
that's the reason why the 1 million contingency within the 106.
Is to work as a buffer. In the event that we don't utilize the full $1 million, we'll start to look at some of the bid alternates, like the pond and additional
I
landscaping.
thought the pond was already
things
left
like
out.
that. It is left out.
Okay.
But in the event we
If
have
we have
funds
extra.
in that contingency, we'll seek to add value back to the project using it.
Is that enough to have in contingency, $1 million?
There are two contingencies. There is a 1 million contingency within the 106, and there's the 5.8 contingency within the soft cost.
It's almost $7 million, sir.
So the,
But the 5.8 we're using, aren't we?
No.
No.
that will remain as contingency. The national average for change orders during greenfield construction is between 2% and 3%. So we believe that 5% is an adequate contingency, and that was confirmed too by AGCM.
Correct me if I'm wrong. We thought it was gonna cost $312.50 a foot, and the bids came in closer to $418 a foot. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
That seems extremely high to me. Please explain why I'm wrong.
Well, in fact, yesterday I went through some newspaper articles and looked up the bid costs from 18 months ago, 24 months ago, for 4 San Jacinto Community College projects in Houston that they had published, and their average bid cost was about $398. So that's without escalation. So that number may have been a bit ambitious, and I think some of the factors that bled into that was the historical averages in this area weren't as high as Houston,
Yeah.
and that drove some of this pricing higher here with the added pressures of the labor market and bidding.
What did it cost us per square foot to build the music building next door?
I don't know that offhand.
August, do you know?
How many square feet are there?
While they're checking on that, I was wondering, the type of buildings for a STEM building and for culinary, those are typically more expensive per square foot anyway because of the type of requirements for
Yeah,
them. Is that true?
Heavy equipment, heavy MEP loads.
Yeah.
Lab space, that sort of thing. Science labs are extremely
more.
expensive, and any sort of lab space then with heavy equipment is going to be more expensive than as opposed to straight instruction, classroom lecture space.
You might mention that. Estimate that too.
The music building ran $375 a square foot.
So our original estimate looks like it was low,
It was low.
312.
The music building by nature was a very expensive building, just by the space alone. It would have been a little bit more than what we would have projected for the STEM and the admin here.
Are you finished with your questions, Mr. Bennett,
For now.
for now? Okay, Ms. Hutchison?
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the bid amounts, especially because they were so close. I have some confidence in those. I am going back to the estimates. And did I understand you're talking about the changes in circumstances, the Exxon announcement and the unemployment drop? You're talking about a space of June and July? Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
And
That happened in June and July, simultaneous to this project going out to bid. So we were not aware of that happening because it was almost simultaneous.
okay, but I haven't looked at those that time period for unemployment, but it changed that much between May and July?
That's what we're getting from statistics from Texas A&M. Is that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it changed in that short period of time.
Pretty extraordinary, yeah.
I think it was more
The lead up
in
to
the
it.
months leading up to it. I'm
Yeah.
not sure it changed.
Yeah, the official groundbreaking for Gulf Coast Growth Ventures. Lenore and I toured the site the other day. It was just kicked off, I don't know, 10 days ago, Lenore, or so. It was massive. It's hundreds and hundreds of acres, and it's one of, and you know, rumors have it there's another one bigger coming, and so it's only going to get steeper. But to go experience that particular job site and to see the resources deployed there, and the dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of trailers just to house the leadership of all of that effort was just, it was eye-opening. I hadn't seen anything like that since the Cheniere project in Sabine Pass.
So I appreciate the impact of that on that unemployment on the bids. I'm having trouble with where that happened within the estimating.
To follow along that same line, because they received their air permit last spring, we knew it was coming, that's been gearing up for a while, and so I guess for the $88 million budget to not have been adjusted several months ago, a year ago, as these things were beginning to happen, and for us to all then come with this shock of the reality versus the estimate is what is I think concerning, is that how did our estimates not progress as market conditions were potentially changing? Because we've known about some of those projects, and we've known about low unemployment for a while now.
I just want to point out two things. One, in addition to what you just said, the steel tariffs and all of the additional tariffs and concern about steel and other material prices kicked up this summer. So there was an indirect effect and prospecting of the subs and the prime in the cost estimation. As it relates to General Kinetic Music Building, it is
August, can I ask you to pause for a second? Your microphone does not seem to be picking up. Beth, could he potentially use, or stand up, please? Thank you.
as it relates to the General Kinetic Music Building, it is for 127,500 square feet at a budget of 46 million. So that, the South Campus is approximately 250,000 square feet at 106. So 127 times 2 and a budget of 46 times 2. And having STEM and having culinary arts, two highly specialized programs in two buildings, added to the factor of the cost per square feet. If you look at the cost per square feet of a central plant, it is over $1,000. If you look at the cost per square feet of restaurant management and STEM, it is much higher than the normal standard. And adding up all those three equates to the higher cost per square feet.
The central plant's not in this one, is it?
No.
It is. No, I'm sorry, it's not in this package, no, sir.
Okay,
But
so
in the
that's,
overall
so that's
budget,
irrelevant.
I think Regent Scott, maybe to address your question and comment, I think, is that on projects like this, it takes years for them to develop, and so the real-time changes, even in the course of 6 months or even 9 months or even a year, these projects of this scale and magnitude are built every day. And so I think part of the challenge is trying to look through that looking glass, and you're dependent on historical data of what's happened in order to kind of, I guess, inform, so to speak, the process as you move forward. And just 2.5 years ago, obviously we talk about the Gamby building and that coming in at a certain dollar range, but that project's not done yet fully. And so it's getting there. It's, y'all are taking occupancy on it, but just to give you a sense of how long those projects take to develop from design all the way through full construction completion. And I could be mistaken, but usually when they're complete is when that data gets figured back into the kind of global cost estimating software and statistical data. So it takes, I think, some time to catch up. And when you have these wild machinations that we I think are undergoing here, understanding your point that there is adjustment that could have been made, but I think in general it's going to take some time to react to these changes on a project this big, because the data just doesn't come in every day. Smaller projects, I think it's easier to react quickly because those are happening in real time and sometimes take 6 months to a year to develop. But I think that's one of the challenges I think that we faced here, and potentially is some causation as to how it was reactionary behind the ball a little bit on that and not catching up. And so obviously now this data now goes into the broader pool of things, and hopefully we'll adjust the market here locally in the cost estimating world. So
I also would like to say we weren't totally blindsided by the market, but we thought we had the market accounted for when the bids came in way under our numbers. So we thought we had been responding to what we had been hearing and what we had been seeing in the marketplace. So we were surprised by the impact of what happened, because we had thought that we had it covered when we had those bids that came in
Well,
directly under ours.
And that was the intention of bidding the central plant first, is to take the market temperature for this type of project. Unfortunately, none of those events had struck yet. Steel tariffs hadn't even come up, and the bidding for that was very fortunate.
Well, from a comment standpoint, I appreciate the work that you all have done to negotiate a lower price from the original bid. And so while the original bid was shocking, this is still higher than, again, we had estimated, but that estimate was within the context of an overall bond amount. You all have also sharpened your pencil on the soft cost so that we see a real change in that soft cost number that can add additional dollars to the construction cost limit. So I appreciate the work that you all have done. I certainly appreciate the work that you did in negotiating with the contractor and the innovation and the creativity with staff to work towards doing all of this within the limit of the bond. And I think that's important to really understand is that we feel like we can accomplish this within existing revenues that the existing plant fund and the revenues that the bond is generating. So I certainly appreciate the hard work that y'all have put in. I know there's other questions or comments from board members. Do we have other questions or comments?
I do.
Yes.
I agree with what Regent Scott just said, and am also very appreciative of the work that's happened over the last several weeks, especially to get this back in line. I am somewhat disappointed that the original estimate was apparently as way off as it was. Some of the things you mentioned, we've had historic unemployment for some time now. The Exxon project was not any surprise to anybody. So, I mean, it feels like we were just off on the estimate, which happens. I'm comfortable with where we are now. Was a bit surprised, obviously, when the bids came in, as many of us were. So I appreciate the effort and just hope that this will inform us better as we move forward with other projects.
Any other questions or comments? I know that there are some public who would like to make comment on this item. So while Mr. Num is bringing those up.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
A moment, please. Just a moment, please.
Oh, okay.
I'm calling on Karen Lindsay, please. I'm doing these in the order they're handed to me. Karen Lindsay?
Do what?
Karen Lindsay for public comment. I have 5 people who want to make
But it
comment.
was on this item.
It is.
Yes.
Well, that's
There's-
not public comment.
Public comment on this item. There are 5 people who want to make a
Yes,
comment.
I want to speak on this item.
So does Miss Lindsay.
They're in order.
The reason I want to speak on this item.
Miss
I've
Lindsay,
said
just
it-
a moment. Mr. Gordy, you are welcome to speak first. Go ahead, Mr. Gordy.
Okay. The reason I wanted to speak on this item, I've been here before over and over and over. We do not need the South Side campus. How many of you sitting up there is bothered checking to see how many empty seats we got? Right now, we got 8,000 to 10,000 empty chairs at Del Mar College right now. There's room for 8 to 10,000 more students. So we do not need the South Side campus. So anybody that votes for this is proving one thing. You don't care about the taxpayers in the Del Mar district. You don't respect them, and you don't care anything about them, because we do not need the South Side campus. And anybody that will raise the price $20 million, something's going on that this needs to be investigated. And I don't know if anybody's investigating it or not, for them to show proof of the increase of the material and everything. They haven't showed you any proof that anything went up. So if you vote for it, come election time, everybody's gonna know it.
Thank you, Mr. Gordy. Karen Lindsay? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm a little hoarse. Was I understanding that it was 10% under budget when they first gave their numbers?
You're here to make public comment.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right, well then, if I understood that correctly, it was 10% under, and then if now the budget's if the proposal is 38.2% over, it's almost a 50% swing in the cost. And we're talking small numbers, what I've been hearing, but when you take 50% over what originally had been estimated, I would wish that we could go and check with the other people that did the bid, where now we're having this expensive overrun, and what's going to happen at the final when, as we move forward. This hit us today. It's been in 2 months, 3 months, whenever it finally came in, and that what's going to happen in a month from now if it's been 2 months and the prices have gone up 50% than what they thought they were going to be. So I would consider waiting on this. People are going to need jobs. People want jobs. When you have an economy that's making money, then people want to work, and let's take a step back. If I was going to buy something, I would wait. If the price changed and I was going to get things with particular, a car with the windows are going to be electric windows, and then all of a sudden now we got to have to get roll-down windows. We're cutting back on what we said on the original projection to be able to save the money. So I know you put a lot of time into it, but it's sure hard that we're going to be stuck with this going forward, and then I don't see an end to it, and that's what I'm concerned about. Okay.
Thank you. Sean Flanagan?
Thank you. I'm retired, lived here 20 years in Corpus Christi. 37 years I spent coaching and teaching at higher education institutions. Okay, I'm speaking here as an owner. The people of Corpus Christi own Del Mar College. 70% of the money that you are so freely spending comes directly out of our pockets. In property taxes, that's 54%, 23% comes from tuition and fees, of which 76% of the students going to Del Mar are our kids. You are elected as the board to run and oversee this place. President's hired to run the place, manage it. Well, how have you done? There is one and only one factor that counts in higher education, and that is the graduation rate. The graduation rate of our college is 16%. Now, how does that sound? Let's put it in comparison. That's over a 3-year period. That's given a 2-year college kid 3 years to graduate. That is based upon, yes, ma'am.
Are you speaking on this item or general public comment?
I'm speaking, I'm going to get to how this ties in, ma'am. Okay, the overall junior college average for 3-year graduation is 25.6. Our college is 40% below that level. 40% below that level. If you got a 16% graduation rate, that means 84% do not graduate. Are you all willing to stand in the door of Del Mar and tell 8 out of every 10 kids you're wasting every penny and every minute you spend coming here because you're not going to graduate? Are you willing to do that? You need to solve the problem. The problem is, getting to the point, is not spending money, hundreds of millions of our dollars, on a campus that is not needed. You specifically told 3 untruths in selling this campus to the general public. The untruths involved the amount of utilization of current buildings, the proposed enrollment, and the cost. All 3 of those, we, the people of Corpus Christi, were lied to about our college. You've got a chance. You've dug yourself a pretty deep hole in our college. Our college is below average. With a 16% graduation rate, how can we be proud of our college? And y'all are the leaders. And you are sitting in here with these fellas in gray suits telling us you're going to spend $100 more millions of our dollars on a campus that is going to do absolutely nothing to improve the central problem of our college, which is a 16% graduation rate. Now, I'm optimistic it can be turned around, but it's not going to be turned around by a totally unnecessary spending of our time and treasure on an unneeded 3rd campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flanagan. John Wilson?
Thank you. My name is John Wilson. I'm here as a concerned taxpayer. My background is in banking, specifically financial management. I've held executive financial management roles with large multi-billion-dollar institutions, including managing capital expenditure projects, much larger than what you're proposing here. I'm here today to ask you to delay this, rethink this project, and re-examine your fiduciary responsibilities to the taxpayers and the citizens of this city. Del Mar's tax rate is one of the highest in the state. Currently, it's at 28 cents per $100. To put that in perspective, Dallas is at 12 cents, Houston at 11, San Antonio at 15, Fort Worth at 14. So we're more than twice, or right at twice the state average, which is unconscionable. Additionally, why wasn't this project rebid after the changes were made? Why is this now being awarded, I guess, as a construction manager at risk project to Fulton Construction? Why wasn't bidding reopened after these changes were made? I'm not sure about the legality of that process. Secondary, CCISD's new Carroll High School is budgeted at $313 a square foot compared to the $425, which when you factor in the plant, you're closer to $500 a square foot. By the way, that $313 is by the same construction company that you're awarding this contract to today. I don't see how you can rationalize that large of a difference. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. And so whose interests are being served by moving forward with this? It's certainly not the students, because the enrollment numbers don't justify the expansion. The taxpayers obviously not, based on the numbers I just quoted you. The only person I can see whose interest it serves is Fulton Construction. And once again, you all have a fiduciary responsibility, and I'm asking you to do the right thing here. Rethink this, postpone it. Let's see if you're gonna go forward, at least go forward at a reasonable rate. The current numbers are egregious. And everyone here, you have a fiduciary responsibility and you will be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Susie Luna Saldana.
Susie Luna Saldana, 4710 Hackle. I want to first of all thank you, because you're doing a fantastic job on being interested in how the money's spent. But I ask you to remember one thing. This was a bond voted on by the voters and approved by them for you to go forward. When you say about enrollment, I look forward to the Southside campus building up that enrollment that we need. As far as cost is concerned, and I understand what you're saying about cost, but let me tell you something in very simple terms. What I bought a loaf of bread for 2 years ago at 89 cents, I'm now paying $1.29. Nothing ever goes down. It always goes up. So to delay it would mean that you would be upping your cost on what you're doing. So it is important that you guys think about what's best for us. I hear a lot about low enrollment. You know why? Because children and students need to be close to where they are. This South Campus will bring those students forward. Will bring them to where they need to be in our college. This is our college, our community college. Not just a few people, but ours, the whole area of South Texas, because that's what one we have. So I urge you to go forward with your plans. Pick what you need to do what you need to do, but remember, when it comes to responsibility, your first responsibility are our children. That is your responsibility. Are you within the bond? That's your next question. If you are, then you need to stick to it. You need to move forward and get our students in that college. And I guarantee you one thing, when you do, you're going to be proud of what you did. And anyone that says no, as far as vote is concerned, think about what you're doing. You're doing this for our children. You're doing this for our city. You're doing this because we need it, not because people want to save taxes. They already voted for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saldana. That's all the cards I have for public comment. So at this point in time, the staff has made a recommendation asking for board approval to award a contract to Fulton Coast Con General Contractor with a guaranteed maximum price of $106 $106,742,500. Is there a motion to proceed?
So moved.
Dr. Adami makes the motion. Is there a second? Second. Second from Ms. Averett. Is there any other questions or comments from Regents? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no.
No.
Motion carries 8-1. There is also an additional staff recommendation to designate $9,850,000 for the acquisition of furniture, fixture, and equipment from unexpended plant funds. And is that sufficient for a motion, Mr. Attorney? Okay. So is there a motion to uphold staff recommendation to allocate the money from the plant fund, excuse me? Ms. Estrada makes the motion.
Second.
Dr. Sherwood made the second. Is there any, yes, question?
Why was it divided up so much? I think 4 and then 5. It was divided up, right? The FFE.
Largely because of the timing and the disbursements. First of all, it's 2 years out. There'll be 2 years before any of that money would even be considered spent, and there'll be another year, up to another 6 months to 9 months after that, that the second disbursement. And so we're looking at packages in different forms of what's needed and kind of a staging for that money.
And that'll suffice for opening the buildings on time?
Yes, and it's up to that amount is what the request is for consideration today.
And that will not be allocated to what, 2 years from now? Is that correct?
Any of those dollars, the first allocation would be in October. The earliest is October 2021.
And what is the plant fund balance now?
Good question.
I'm looking at the audited financial statements from last year.
Okay, so let me look at my notes real quick, so I do have that information for you.
There was a memo it's up on the screen, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the plant fund is $7.9 million as of today.
And we're allocating how much?
We're gonna allocate to the for FF&E $9.8 million.
So if you're asking the delta there, next month there'll be, talk about next month's transfers.
Yes, so what's gonna happen is, for next month, we're gonna be transferring a total of $5.4 million from our operating fund into the plant fund, which will bring up our FF&E to $9.8 million. So going back to that 7.9, there's really two components as it stands today, is 4.3 million for FF&E, and then 3.5 for the ERP system. When we transfer 5.4 million, that'll bring it up to 9.8, which we're requesting approval for the designation of these dollars for FF&E on Project 2.
The 5.4, is that coming from the 2014 bond, or is that coming from the general fund?
That is coming from our operating fund, not bond dollars. This is operating.
Which is typically where our plant fund dollars come from. That's how we've built the plant fund.
Yeah.
Carryover dollars from operations.
Okay.
So in essence, we're allocating out of the existing balance, and we're pre-designating the future balance.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no.
No.
That motion carries 8-1. Thank you all. We do have a closed session item, but before we go into that, I do want to thank again, staff, the work that you all have done to get us to this point. I know has been difficult. It was not a situation that anybody was happy about, and so we are. I think we are making the best out of what was a situation none of us expected. But I applaud the work that you all have done. So at this point in time, I'm going to ask that the board stay, and we'll clear the room in just a moment after I read this, please. The board will go into closed session pursuant to Government Code 551.071 regarding pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offer with possible discussion and action in open session, and the seeking of legal advice from counsel on pending legal or contemplated matters or claims with possible discussion and action in open session. Also under Texas Government Code 551.072 regarding the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property and the possible discussion and action in open session, and Texas Government Code 551.073 regarding the deliberation of a prospective gift or donation with possible discussion or action in open session. The time is 12 noon. We'll take a 5-minute recess while we clear the room. The board has returned from closed session at 12:29 p.m. There's no action out of closed session. At this time, is there anyone here to speak in general public comment? I don't see anyone here to speak in general public comment. Therefore, the meeting is adjourned at 12:29 p.m.